throw in, Ricky.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah,
Excellent.
that would be great if you guys wouldn't mind sharing some slides so that I can also share within my team as well so that
Oh,
everyone can kind of
absolutely.
get a better understanding. But yeah, I think I get the overview. Um,
Yeah.
and one question that I did have related to Salmonella serotypes is there a central place where the serotype data comes from? Is it from clinical hospital labs? Is it generated at the public health laboratories? The serotype names that I'm looking at where does that data come from? Who inputs that data? I guess is my question.
Yeah, I think these, Christina, do you remember which public health agency requested this? These are
It was
as far as
Oregon.
Oregon. Okay, so
Hmm.
these either come from the public health lab or some other clinical labs that report these results um, as as part of their electronic lab result reporting requirements to the public health agency. So it's these were collected by the health agencies and they asked us to, share or identify the correct SNOMED codes for these serotypes.
Okay, that's helpful to
But
understand.
but anyone can request a SNOMED code. It's not
Yeah.
limited. And then I don't know if your question was related to what's in the LIS and the EHR and healthcare IT. The terms that these codes would be mapped to are built by each individual laboratory, determined, according to in a regard with CLIA, what's on their test menu, or in the public health labs, what they build in their LIMS system. And then also this would be exchanged with the EHRs as well, in accord with a lot of the federal regulations around healthcare interoperability. Does that help?
Yes, that's helpful. Thank you. And I guess my next question is specific to the Salmonella serotypes. I see some of the SNOMED names associated with the codes are things like um, Salmonella 1 group 030. And the
Mhm.
reason I'm asking about where the data comes from is if I had access to, a whole genome sequence, I could more definitively resolve some of these serotypes. Possibly. I don't know if that's the goal or if we just are looking to work with what we have and move forward, grouping it as best as possible.
We're kind of a little bit of a challenge on that one because one, NCBI for their genomic content for bacteria is not considered an authoritative source by SNOMED International. And the organism hierarchy in SNOMED was structured based on the Linnaean taxonomy. So it's a phenotypic structuring as opposed to a genetic structuring. There is some bleed over between the genetic structuring that has kind of infiltrated what's been built over the last 20 to 30 years. But that's kind of a little bit of background on the organism hierarchy.
Thank you. That's helpful too.
Just
Yeah,
one other
so
tidbit too. There are some tests that only identify certain types of the serotypes, like A, D, E, or G. Um, Sometimes those codes where there's multiple serotypes that need to be reported are not available in SNOMED. You have to walk up to what the next closest parent would be for coding in a laboratory information system and reporting those to, just as a tidbit.
Thank you. So I guess my biggest question is for this review, what sort of information are you looking for me to provide? Because I mean, I am passionate about Salmonella serotypes and the nuances, so I could go deep, or if I had a list of what is available, I could choose which code best fits that particular serotype. And I'm assuming that's maybe what you guys want.
I mean
I,
we
I think
we go ahead.
I think we have two items. One is if the existing name is a semantic equivalent synonym for an existing concept that's already in the SNOMED hierarchy, identifying what that concept is would be the first step. But then if there isn't an exact match for the name that's present in the spreadsheet, identifying it as a gap so that we can request it for addition, whether we add it to the APHL extension or whether we add it to the US extension or to the international edition of SNOMED.
Got it. Okay. I can definitely do that. Um, it should not take me very long. It would be helpful, I'm assuming, to have some sort of export of what my options for grouping into a code would be, so that I can identify if a close match is available or not. And is it possible to export that kind of information?
We can, or you can look it up in the browser, and I'm not sure which way, because if we give you um, a flat export, let me
Mhm.
just take a quick look here at how many concepts we're actually going to be dropping
I
out,
think
because right
it's
now
quite
there's
a few.
2,735 concepts that are subtypes of the genus Salmonella. If we specifically go to the O antigen concepts, there are currently 2,692. So I'm not sure how easy a spreadsheet with almost 3,000 concepts is going to be to traverse as opposed to looking it up in the browser.
Yeah, so what I've pulled up here is the browser, and we kind of stopped a little bit right in the middle of it,
Mhm.
explaining how SNOMED works, but so it is organized by different clinical contexts or hierarchies, and it includes relationships and synonyms. So in the browser that I was just in, you can see that this is the term I currently clicked on. It's the genus Salmonella. It has a parent um, in this relationship, and then it has children. And you can see there is different organization of children that this has. Um, and obviously, this may or may not be all correct. So that's another caveat in here. But as John was saying, the organism hierarchy is kind of trying to follow the Linnaean hierarchy, and it's phenotypic organization. So here is kind of the term then that says categorized by the O antigen, and then for each of the children, if they have an arrow here, you can see they have children, and those have children again and again, and so on. And so if we give you this as a flat file, this is not necessarily visible, right?
Right.
Because the different branches don't translate into a flat
Yeah.
file.
And Ricky, can I share for a second?
Of course.
Um,
Oh, and Nancy, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to know, do thinking about the future, um, do we have separate categories for salmonella that are identified genetically and salmonella that are identified traditionally?
no, we don't have the ability in SNOMED right now to make that differentiation.
Okay,
You would get that in the data from an ELR report based on the test that was performed, right? So you would have
okay,
to look at the loin code in the HL7 message that says this is the test I did. So then whether if they did serotyping by phenotypic serotyping, the test would make that clear, the method, and otherwise, if they're using sequencing or something else, you would see that in the loin code.
okay. So
Well, yeah, the test would say which method because you need to distinguish those on your order catalog from clinical labs, but I understand public health labs have these generic orders and they add on things. And so there's a lot more flexibility in public health labs of what might come out. So it might be helpful to make the distinctions.
But yeah, on the order, the public health lab might be more generic, but on the resulted test, they would be specific, whether they did whole genome sequencing or phenotypic discovery for sure.
Okay. So, so Christina had a comment here. The lab also mentions they would like the codes to have specific descriptors that would be included, such as rough, non-modal, or partial antigenic formulas. Okay.
Mhm.
Due to the biologic or genetic behavior of the organisms.
And we do have some representation of non-moltal already in, so adding those into the SNOMED CTFSN is definitely available to us. So that's not
Okay.
an issue.
Okay.
Um, is there anything else, Nancy?
Yeah, I wanted to ask Charlotte if your phenotypic identifications fit into a genetic identification. Like, are there five phenotypes that could be the same genetic organism or vice versa? Like, how does that come out?
The serotyping for genetic versus phenotypic is pretty much similar. We are learning more as we sort of look at serotyping in the genetic age. We actually published a paper last year in collaboration with University of Georgia. I don't know if anyone's heard of Seq0, but it's an application that we use in our PulseNet system for genetic salmonella serotyping. That sort of harmonizes whole genome serotyping with the phenotypic serotyping and kind of collapses some serotypes based on what we know from the genetic serotyping that we now do versus phenotypic, where we
Okay.
had much more granular data.
Right.
So it probably harmonizes pretty well. I was more so thinking, I mean, I'm looking at some of the serotypes that I see, and it's like 41227 minus minus, which when I'm looking at that looks like a non-modal serotype. However, I could also envision a scenario where a lab maybe only did serogrouping rather than full serotyping, which would classify things differently because that would not necessarily mean that the serotype was non-modal. It would just mean that they didn't test for those H antigens, the flagellar antigens. So I didn't know if there was more information to sort of discern that nuance or if I should just kind of go based on whatever is written and recorded.
Well, see, we didn't know those nuances, so we can go back to Oregon and say, can you include the link code that we got those with? Or do we know any more detail on that part?
Yeah, because a lot of, at
Yeah.
least a lot of public health labs have shifted to when they're doing phenotypic serotyping, only doing serogrouping, just with, transitioning to whole genome sequencing and not validating serotyping under CLIA. So that's something that we've seen. So that was just something that I was wondering if there was that kind of detail available, could we discern that from?
Yeah, we'll ask them if they have that information.
That sounds great.
Go ahead, Andrea.
Andrea,
Yeah, I was just going to say too, depending on the testing for microbiology workups and the microsections of the LAS again and workflows from the labs I've worked in, is there's typically, there's identification and then there's also things related to characteristics, I'll just say, of the organism that get reflexed as add-on lab tests. So it might be motility and then either grading or description in the value of free text. It could be a drop down. bioMérieux wanted to request some of these characteristics for organisms related to the testing they perform. I don't know if those have been requested in SNOMED that came in from Xavier a while ago. from to a shield request, but we haven't really gotten to it, unfortunately. But then if there's other types of things, like the non-motility and things, there are some codes in SNOMED that kind of like resistance as well that are in some pre-coordinated organisms and other things. So I think it is something that we need to kind of work through on how best to report them, because typically they're separate items and not the pre-coordinated terms. Although some might say that there's like beta lactamase, organisms, those types of things. It depends on where in the workflow it occurs. Because if it's gram staining, those types of things are before you have identification and speciation, and serotyping for things like this. So I just kind of put that in there because some things might be in preliminary reports versus final reports and final, um, and then typically the pre-coordination is usually not reported by the clinical lab for a number of things, because of the ELR and just clinical reporting structures and exchanges, and how those are reported. But there are some things that get pre-coordinated for like HII reporting and other things downstream. So, and I know we've been talking about blood cultures too on this call. So
Yeah, but not right now.
I know
Let's,
that's another
Yep.
subject, but
Yeah.
the structuring in where it occurs in different systems differing is the same.
And can I jump in, Ricky?
absolutely, please. Yes.
Okay. So, Charlotte, with regard to SNOMED, you'll notice that we have a number of different descriptions here. And so one of the authoritative sources for SNOMED bacterial content is the LPSN database. And so when we're looking at that, SNOMED tries to add the fully specified name for a concept, which is the anchor definition. That's the one with the semantic tag, if I could actually find my browser again. So this would be considered the true organism name in this particular case. However, this one hasn't been updated appropriately because according to LPSN, that Salmonella Arizona is actually a synonym. It's not actually the correct name. As far as their taxonomic status, it should actually be this as the fully specified name. We may retain homotypic and heterotypic synonyms as synonyms to the SNOMED concept. So one of the things that you may find as part of this work is that the SNOMED concept is present, but the descriptors are out of order for the current day naming of the concept. And so that may also be something that would need to be flagged so that we would actually update the fully specified name to either be one of the synonyms or demote the FSN to be a synonym and actually create the correct name as the fully specified name.
Good to
That
know. Thank
was
you.
kind of confusing. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to respond. But we have the fully specified name as the anchor definition, and that will always have this semantic tag on the end of it, which you see here. The next is the preferred term or the preferred synonym. And this is the one that the organism would typically be referred to by clinicians. And this is the description that would actually should be displayed in all clinical or laboratory systems. And then any synonyms, whether they be historical names, heterotypic or homotypic synonyms, or anything else, to identify that as the correct concept for that organism.
That makes sense. Thank you. And
Mhm.
back to requesting an export. I mean, the system does look much easier to navigate through rather than sorting through a 2000 plus term
Yeah,
spreadsheet if I'm able to have access and view it in this way.
and
Yeah.
everybody can have access to the browser. And actually, as you're looking in the browser, if you're on the summary tab, you can actually walk up and see how that concept has been categorized all the way up to its very top level. um, which should end up being here. Yes. And then domain, bacteria, and organism. So you can see the full hierarchy all the way up to the very root concept. So you can see whether it's actually organized correctly. If you click on the details tab, that will give you an idea of all of the different descriptions. We deal mostly in US English as the default language, but you will also see the Great Britain English as well. The diagram is not really going to tell you very much because the organism hierarchy is what's called a primitive hierarchy, meaning that there's no logical definition assigned to a organism from an attribute definition. But so the diagram probably not going to be very helpful, as well as the content on the other tabs not helpful. So most everything you'll want to see is on either the summary or the detail tab.
And do you guys happen to have any sort of training resources on how to navigate through SNOMED, just in case I feel lost once I get in there?
Um,
How you're explaining it now seems pretty self-explanatory, but just to have the resource available.
Probably the easiest and fastest thing for this project, given the time constraints, just reach out directly to me and I'll be happy to walk you through whatever you need.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Manjula, I see your hand up, but I wanted to point out one other thing. John, if you want to just go over to the left and click on this organism button for the semantic tag, filter results by semantic tag. So you can, when you start using this, because really the only concepts you want to look at are in the organism hierarchy, you can, you know, get rid of any other noise that might come up over here on your left-hand side search results, right? So, um,
And that's a good point, Ricky. I didn't think about that, but if we actually look at the findings, organism are used as defining attributes for a clinical finding if it is the causative agent for an infectious disease or disorder. And so you'll see organism potentially names showing up in other concepts. So you would want to definitely filter those out. For example, here where we see bacteremia caused by salmonella, our genus Salmonella is our causative agent as part of the logical definition. So we would want to filter those out. And the easiest thing to do is just check the box next to organism, and that will constrain your searches purely to the organism hierarchy. Manjula?
Yeah, I was just, I know this is a lot of information for Charlotte. I was just thinking, I know we used a lot of terms. I was just curious if you are aware of pre-coordination and post-coordination. We use that term a lot. So just just curious if I know that that term came up, so maybe it needs clarification, Charlotte, if you're not aware of that. And there's so many experts here who can clarify that better than me. So just wanted to bring it up because I heard that term being used a few times. So just wanted to flag that.
Thank you. And I'm sure I will have several questions as I navigate through, but sounds like you guys are very willing to help me through, and
oh, absolutely.
hopefully I'm able to to get this done quickly. And I'm
Yeah.
just another curious question. How often do you get requests like these for resolving data um, from public health labs or clinical labs?
Um, I guess I mean, I don't know, what is it, like 2, 3 times a month? But they're not always this big, right?
Right.
They're not
Yeah.
always a big collection. Oftentimes it's a single result or a group of like 4 or 5 results. we actually get a lot more questions or requests for new LOINC or support for creating new LOINC codes. So that identifying the test more often than we get SNOMED requests, but we get both. Um, so and one of the things we used to get a lot, and we still get quite regularly, are requests for SARS-CoV-2 lineages, for example, right? And so those, John and us, we had a discussion about those and whether they want to have those in the U.S. edition. So one of the things we didn't really talk about is there's SNOMED content that's international, and that's the international edition. And then each member country, because SNOMED is organized by membership by country. Yeah.
Give me one second. I can explain this actually. I just got
Okay,
done doing
great.
this as a slide.
Okay, perfect.
So there's a lot going on this slide, so I apologize in advance. But SNOMED, unlike other terminologies, allow for the extension of the terminology and the ability to identify that extension as being associated with a specific country or even an organization. And that's done through the presence of what we call a namespace identifier. So there's a specific string of numbers that's included inside of every SNOMED concept ID, which is this SCT ID you'll see here. If this concept had actually been authored by myself in the US, there's actually an additional string of numbers that would actually show up right here at the 3 digits from the end. So basically, when we create the US edition, what we're doing is we're taking all of the content in the international edition modules here at the top, which represents about 360,000 concepts, and we're marrying those together with the 8,000 concepts that are specific to US medicine. And those are what I maintain in the US extension module. And basically, we zip those two things together. It reclassifies them and reorganizes the hierarchy correctly. And what we get out of that is what we call the US edition. So if we were to actually create an APHL edition, it would actually sit on top of this US edition, and therefore it would have all the US content, all the international content, as well as all of the APHL content.
And since we decided that the lineages shouldn't be in the US content, we put them
Mhm.
in the APHL extension. And so we're currently working on we used to publish just the APHL extension content in FinVads, but since that's going away, we're figuring out how to publish it now, and we're talking with John about publishing like an APHL edition or something like that. Well, we're working on that.
We try and keep the content in the international edition and the US edition as stable as possible. And when it came down to the individual variants, the identification rate and the turnover rate was so rapid, without the understanding of which were clinically relevant and which weren't, that the churn just became larger than what we wanted to put the US extension through, because every time we do a release, which is twice a year, implementers then have to bring that new version of SNOMED into their systems and have to reconcile all of the changes. And so we try to be as nice to implementers as we can and reduce that churn level as much as possible.
Well, this has been very informative and helpful to understand SNOMED and the system and all the informatics behind it. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to give me this overview.
Awesome. Yeah. So Christina will reach out to Oregon and get you some more information. And I'll make sure that you have John's contact information. We'll get you some slides pulled together for background on SNOMED, and then we'll let you loose.
Thank you. That sounds great. And I went into the browser and I'm poking around. So hopefully, like I said, I've already done some initial interpretation just based on the spreadsheet. So hopefully it won't be too difficult to make these interpretations. Is there a
Awesome.
specific timeline we're hoping for me to get this back to you guys? I know we'll wait on some additional information from Morgan, but is
It's
there
not super urgent, so
okay.
it's not burning, but maybe not next year. So
Okay. I was thinking maybe September is where I
yeah,
was going. Yeah, okay.
yeah, that's definitely, I mean, given the amount of codes in the spreadsheet, that's very reasonable. Yeah.
That sounds great.
Awesome. Thank you. I have one other topic that we've been kind of pushing around a little bit. So if we can switch and think about uh, Carious testing, and do at least the LOINC code. So I can request that. Um, I'd like to get your input on whether we want to uh, um, do something like metagenomic DNA and RNA sequencing. Um, and would we want one for um, specimen, or would we want two, one for cell-free plasma and one for bronchoalveolar lavage, because
Have,
the
have you
organism
started?
list difference is different between those two.
So it looks like you have multiple things that you would like standards for here, codes for. Have you started to lay this out in a spreadsheet to look at all the test details together that go together for the complete meeting so that and what's available and what might be needed, including I assuming it's a FDA 510K, but let me know if it's not, if it's an LDT.
No, this is a research only test.
Okay, so more like an LDT.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay, but need to know the test detail. So that's the target Excel that you have here. Can you put it in the
Yeah.
chat?
Hmm. Yeah. It's let me see, I can open it up. But really it's, I mean, so what Carius does is they look for bits and pieces of anything in either the cell-free plasma or the bronchoalveolar lavage, and they report everything that's in there, anything that they find. Um, and it's sequencing based. I don't think that there is like a package insert because, it's not, it's their secret sauce. They're not sharing.
Well, then it's gonna be really hard to map to know what they actually are providing.
Well, so ideally
Because it's gonna be a
what they,
black box, it sounds like from what you're describing. I mean,
what
but
it is a little bit of a black box. What they really want is substance concept. I mean, what they're finding is DNA and RNA pieces of organisms. And so, um, I ideally we would need a lot of content in the substance hierarchy to 100% represent what these guys are actually finding. Um, but
so
as
how
a surrogate and to trigger reporting, they've mapped to organism because there are many more concepts available. Um, and so that's kind of, I think,
So from what the details, the few details you've shared, and it doesn't seem like it's all that different from what we talked about on the leader call with the upcoming link changes with RNA and DNA based link codes for infectious diseases. Is because if that's what they're performing, and you're
Yeah.
getting results of those pieces that you're describing. They're
Mhm.
not culturing or identifying a full organism, right? They're
Correct.
identifying biomarkers. So it would be more akin to how those LOINC codes are modeled, if you will, and those tests are, and typically you're not using organism or substance with those. Those are usually qualifier values if it's positive, negative, or potentially you might have some identifiers if you're looking at specific translocations or markers.
But they
But
are, yeah, but they are not reporting they're basically reporting their interpretation of what they're finding. So they're not reporting each individual marker they have as detected, not detected. They're just reporting what they're detecting.
right, but that's just another property in the link code that's kind of modeled the same way.
Well, it's a different component, right? So I I I'm leaning towards using this link code.
Which one?
The metagenomic, I'll open it up. This one.
Okay. Yeah, so I think what you need is more on the testing that they performed if you have the information, because right now what you've shared, there's just insufficient information to help you, unfortunately.
I don't have
We'll
any
make
more
sure you have
information.
the,
Yeah.
so do you have that spreadsheet that you could said you could drop in the chat or share?
Uh, yeah, I don't think I can drop a file in the
Okay.
chat.
Okay.
But
Or email after the call and we can look
yeah,
it
it is
over.
on, it is embedded in the minutes, but I can pull it up if I remember where I
Or you
stuck
could,
it.
yeah, share the page and I can get to the minutes that way,
Yeah, I can do that.
if that works.
Of course, now my
I'm just
chat
trying to understand
disappeared.
because I understand that, sequencing and stuff, but there's sequencing done for a variety of purposes. And so it's just understanding how this is the same or different as others. Thank you.
Let's see. What more do I know about that?
And are they a vendor or a clinical laboratory?
They're a clinical laboratory
Okay.
slash vendor. I mean, they're the only ones doing this particular test.
So then they're a clinical laboratory.
Yeah.
Well, they sell this test to clinical laboratories.
Yeah, they're performing the testing.
Yeah, but they're not commercially distributing it. It's you have to send your sample to them as a lab to
Correct.
perform it,
Right.
right? Okay. That's why I just wanted, thank you.
Yeah. This is their website. Put that in the chat.
Thank you. Yeah, there's probably some research that's needed, so I don't think we can probably do it in the next 10 minutes, but
Yeah. But that's all I have, right? So,
and the other thing too is it's good that you said the cell-free DNA and things like that. If it's something that's not a specimen type, it'd be good to make sure that that's available in SNOMED too. I haven't checked. It may already be available. I don't know if anyone knows or if you guys have checked already to get
Which
the
is that,
stuff.
Andrew?
The cell-free DNA that Ricky's showing that and is on the screen that they use for the sample.
no, they're looking for cell-free DNA.
Oh, they're
Right.
detecting. Okay,
So
I thought.
Yeah, they're
what's
they're
this?
using they're using um what are they using? Plasma? Hang on.
Oh, the cell-free plasma. Sorry,
Yeah, cell-free plasma.
sorry. That's what I
Yeah.
meant. I was looking at your spreadsheet.
Yeah,
So we do list cell-free DNA as a substance,
right.
How
but
about
we
cell-free plasma?
not cell-free plasma, and we don't have a specimen concept either. But technically, that wouldn't be the correct specimen, would it? Because that would have been the cell-free plasma would be considered an isolate after it was spun down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that have to look at their specimen collection details on what specimens they request or require for their tests.
Yeah, I think they're taking serum and
It says it's a blood test.
yeah.
But I think you're right, John. To get to that plasma layer, you have to spin it down like
Yeah,
you
so
would like a
how,
bone marrow buffy
right.
coat.
So do we need a specimen concept then? Or for,
We
well, not
we
for collection, but
we might.
okay. All right. I mean, we have the cell-free DNA substance to reference as the specimen substance, so that's not a problem. So that's a fairly easy lift to take care of.
Yeah, but we would need something in the specimen hierarchy because labs don't have access to
Oh no.
map to
Right,
the
right, right.
substances.
He was
Yeah,
Yep.
just saying because we already have the substance, it's
it's
easy
a it's
to
a it's a kind of an analog.
it's easier to add one to this
Yeah.
Yep.
specimen hierarchy than if we didn't already have the substance.
Yeah, I don't have to prove that the substance actually exists
Gotcha.
in order to prove it's needed as a specimen. So,
Hmm.
No, this is good. Thanks for bringing this up, though, Ricky.
Yep. And then here's their pathogen list. It's very long.
And assuming
Yeah.
those are all in SNOMED organism hierarchy.
They are not yet. That's the thing, right? So
But
that's what they said
Aspergillus
to
is in
us.
there.
Yeah, there are a lot of them that are in here, but
Herpes is in there, right?
there are a lot of them that are not. So
Okay. Yeah.
so that's
So
the other question is of these that are missing in the organism hierarchy, where do we add them?
it, Ricky, sorry, this is my ignorance. This isn't a Toff type thing, is it?
Uh, no,
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 doesn't look
Okay.
like it.
yeah. I mean, they're looking for cell-free DNA, and I'm not entirely sure. Um,
Okay. It's not based off of molecular weight of the organism.
no, I don't think so.
Okay.
It's based on it's sequencing related.
Okay. Is there any way that we could get this list in a flat form or in an Excel sheet?
Yeah, I already
Oh,
have
you
that.
have it?
Yeah,
It
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
that's in the link.
It's in here.
oh,
Yeah,
can
and
And it
it
you?
has
looks
the mappings with all the organism specific ones, and if there is a substance ones, I've mapped those as well.
you've
Oh,
Um,
okay.
highlighted where they're missing or when they're just in US release too, which is good.
yeah. So
Okay.
I've done that part of the footwork, but
That's a lot of it, so that's good.
Yeah.
yeah,
How many new concepts do we need?
93 in the organism hierarchy, but so many more in the substance hierarchy. So my suggestion was to just finish off the 93 for the organism hierarchies and then work on the substance hierarchy over time and tell carriers they can switch later, but
Yeah, if you put those into a batch template, I can load those into the USCRS because I think these, just looking at them, those should be in the US extension. I don't think we need to put those in the APHL extension.
okay, cool.
So, John, it looks like
Mhm.
a couple of them might be multiple organisms that are
Right.
identified.
So those we'd have to figure out how we want to
Those,
deal with.
Things haven't
yeah,
changed there, right? I'm assuming.
no, it's still, those are clinical findings.
So they're not going to be able to map them from a lab perspective and for ELR or anything like that if
They still
applicable.
can't handle a multi-map.
No,
That's
no, I don't know anyone who can really.
I think some of the public health labs do now, just because they manually build um their value sets, but
So they add two SNMED codes to one lab organism where it comes up like organism X/organism Y.
So
no,
is this,
if there is a clinical finding term for it, they manually add that into their list, into their value set, even if it
Okay,
doesn't
so
come from the same
so clinical,
hierarchy.
yeah, so clinical findings that and substance hierarchy are generally are not available, used by clinical laboratories. And
Hmm.
Kathy, you guys use them at LabCorp at all? I would also venture to say this reference laboratories. So it might be just that some public health labs are using them.
Yeah,
It, it, Andrea, does the slash interpret it as an and or an or?
it's a it's an or. See, they say they cannot. They're closely related species where the test cannot determine the exact species like this.
Yeah, it's kind of a limitation of the test. Kind of like
Yeah.
with when we were talking about serotyping, like the test might only be able to detect that it's, salmonella serotype A, B, I forgot if it's D. There's one of them it doesn't, it skips over, but it can't tell which one, if you will.
Hmm.
And so
Yep.
similarly with organisms, like Xavier, I think did his poster a decade ago that from bioMérieux, it can only tell you that it's either X or Y, but it can't give you any more details as to specifics.
Yeah, it's or.
Let me think about that for a little bit. I'm
Yeah.
I'm on the fence because I I can override international editorial policy and put
Ooh.
disjunction into the US extension, but I'm extremely hesitant to do so just because the sins of the father always ends up getting visited on the children, and I don't know when that's going to come back to bite us if we do that.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I mean I think we could look at those. I know they were in the past a couple of those in the organism hierarchy. I don't know if they all got moved to clinical findings yet or not. But we certainly don't want to add
Yeah.
more. But yeah.
But this begs the question, we're never going to be able to get 100% mapping coming out of clinical labs because of some of these gaps. And I mean, I understand why from editorial, because laboratories are not going to be using findings. Those are up to clinicians to determine and put those on their problem list. So the clinician would have to see this and say, oh, it's organism X or Y, and to put the finding code associated with their problem list, which is fine there. But if it's, laboratory to laboratory reporting, like for ELR, EC, even
Hmm.
ECR in a way, if there's not a finding involved and other types of public health reporting, then this is going to be a continued long term, like it has been, gap.
Yeah, I mean, if it truly is an issue that comes down to affecting state reportable labs, then that to me is a compelling use case to say, yes, we should represent in a small number of cases the or scenario within the organism hierarchy. Um, I just want to think that through as well as
Oh yeah,
look at
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah, no problem.
the sheer number of it, and to see how many of these or situations truly do impact state reportable or CDC public health reportable conditions or
A lot of
organisms.
these do not because they're not
Okay.
even necessarily pathogens, I think is what um,
Yeah. And the
Nancy
other
was
thing I
saying.
would want to do is reach out to Virginia Tech and talk to them about their editorial policy for these
Mhm.
situations as
Hmm.
well, so that whatever we're doing at the US level aligns with what they're doing, so that when we cross over,
Hmm.
we're consistent.
Yeah, no, totally agree on that. The other
That'd
thing
be
it'd be good to
fantastic.
do is reach out to Xavier because again, Bayer reports out some of these
Hmm.
globally, and he might be able to give you numbers. I don't know if it's like 5% of all organisms, if it's closer to 10%. I don't think it would be more than 10%. But there are a number. I mean, I encountered it with mapping that there's
Hmm.
labs nationally that have these in their data dictionaries that we're trying to map to, and we couldn't map to. Or what we end up doing is again, kind of like the serotyping, is if there's a parent then we can, work
Hmm.
on mapping to the parent, but we can't specify further.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
thinking we do have something like, if there's something we can come up with like similar to the Mycobacterium tuberculosis complex, right? Where there's multiples that kind of fall into this group that
Uh,
clinically they're all related.
Hmm.
I know, but I so hate complexes
I
just
know,
because they are so inconsistently represented in literature.
I know.
Um,
I know.
and
I
the
don't like them either.
yep,
I'm just saying, you know, in
yep,
some cases we may actually be able to do this, but in others they they may be in two different, completely different genuses or something, and you
yep.
know,
Right. You
then
can't.
we
Uh,
can't do that, right?
yeah.
So
I can say though, if we do go down the path of the or, I want to make sure that both organisms are represented as discrete concepts in the terminology, because if at any time
yeah,
the sensitivity for the lab test increases to the point to differentiate,
yeah,
I don't want people to continue using that or concept in the absence of other content.
That's a great
right,
idea. I like that.
So,
But it's
um,
yeah, it's just it's also an issue that for mapping, and sorry, I know we're over, but for mapping from what is supported by LAS and EHR vendors, and when we think about things, it's good public health labs can do this, but can the public health agencies, receive this, and like CDC if things go up to that level? Because if all the systems can only support a one-to-one mapping,
mhm.
um, now you can update, you could say like 5 years ago when we mapped this, it was X or Y. And then, like you said, if technology or the testing changes and you can distinctly identify Y, then they should be mapping to Y going forward or X going forward if they can make that distinction based on the test methods.
right, yeah,
But
Okay,
it's kind of like some of the loint codes too that are like, I think for
yeah.
Legionella, others you can't tell.
We're way
okay,
over, so I'm gonna I have to
Um,
drop for another call,
call it.
but thank you. I appreciate that. And I guess we'll get back to this personally. I think because they call out metagenomic and um, that's why they're um, that's the that's the loin part they are currently using in their reporting is metagenomic DNA and RNA sequencing. Or metagenomic DNA, RNA and DNA is what they're using as a loin part. And that's what
um,
they call their loink, right? That's how they identify
guys,
their tests using loinkbach. Yeah,
I just found a document that kind of describes all of this from
Awesome.
University of Nebraska. So why don't I share that with you?
that would be
Please,
Imagine
fantastic.
that. That's
Okay.
awesome.
it's got to have Jim Campbell's name on it.
Oh, it depends. It
Well,
depends.
yeah. Uh, at any rate, can I just put it in the chat or you want me to send it?
If you
Oh,
can,
email it, please.
Okay, that's what I'll
Yeah.
do.
Thanks,
okay,
Thank
Ann.
you.
All
All
right.
awesome.
right, bye.
Bye.
Right.